In this video, I'm going to show you my budget and my scope of work for our latest new construction project. This is actually a project that's under construction right now, and I'm going to completely pull back the curtain and show you what I think it's going to cost and the scope of work that I'm putting on it. And I'm also going to focus this video on places where new construction builders tend to be the most vulnerable, and it's also going to focus on places where I tend to make mistakes. So hopefully this can help you if you're transitioning into new builds or if you're just a new builder in general, because we're all never perfect, right? And we always have to make sure we pay attention to the places where people make the most mistakes. So this is going to be more of what I'm going to consider an old school video for TRP. We used to do these videos all the time where I just pull back our spreadsheets and I show you everything that we're doing. If you don't know, we are the Rehabbers Playbook, but a big thing we do in the group is new construction. As a matter of fact, I think there's a huge push of new construction in the group, to the extent that I would say 50% of what we talk about and do is now new construction, and it's definitely a passion of mine. So again, I really want to pull back the curtain and show you what I do and how I do it. And of course, what you'll see here, and if you've never seen me talk before, this might be new to you, but if you guys have seen me, you know that I use Rehab Valuator to make our budgets, to track our scopes of work, to track our budgets, all that stuff, right? Draws, schedules, you get all of that in here. But we're going to focus on the budget and the scope of work. And by the end of the video, I will show you where you can actually download this exact budget and scope of work so you can have it for yourself, that maybe it can help you in the future as well. All right, so let's just dive right in and jump into this. And what you'll see is we start at the top here with our soft costs. And when we talk about where you're going to be the most vulnerable in new construction, it is always in soft costs, okay? It's always in site preparation or in permitting, the surveys, the engineering, the building plans, all that stuff. And I'll point out a few of them here. And some of these, are going to be more vulnerable for people who are making the transition into new construction that have never had to do stuff like this before. Some of these are just, it's a vulnerable spot for everybody. Okay, so surveyor fees, I think everybody knows you need a survey, but not everybody who is new to new construction knows that you're going to be paying fees during construction, like staking and brick points. And that's going to add on to your budget about $300 to $400 per trip. Architects are pretty straightforward. Everybody knows you need an architect. Engineering, you're going to need soil reports. And that might be something that's new to people too when they get into new construction. Permits are more expensive than your normal renovation permit. So that could be a vulnerability right there. Dumpsters and toilets. Now, dumpsters, I think, are obvious, but toilets might not be if you're making that transition too. So you have to make sure not only in your budget, but in your just project management, you always have a place for people to go to the bathroom until you get the plumbing hooked up, which tends to take some time, right? Now, this is really where you're the most vulnerable right here. And it's the water and the sewer, the utility connections. And this varies by city and county quite a bit. Sometimes the city is involved with some of this hookup. Sometimes they're not involved at all. Sometimes they're involved more than usual, right? So this is where you're going to be vulnerable. This is where you could be under budgeting or just not planning properly. So just know that this is something that you have to research. Call your city, your county. How much does it cost? What does this process look like? And what do you need from me? Okay, typically, let's just say what we do in our area, we're going to be paying them tap fees to the city. Okay, they're going to be doing work in the right-of-way areas, and then we're going to be responsible for everything beyond the right-of-way areas for the most part. But even there is a little bit of overlap because we need a third-party contractor to hook up sewer in the right-of-way areas, but the water is going to be everything. All of our jobs going to be within our property line for the most part. Okay, there's just gray area there, and it gets kind of confusing sometimes. So this is something you really need to focus on early in the process and early in the project so you know what you're doing and what you're going to spend. Okay, so I recommend putting a big contingency cost within this line item to make sure you're in good shape. From there, we have kind of normal things like staging, design, which I always get a designer involved, of course, and then clearing. That's typically pretty straightforward. You see a lot, there's trees on it, you have to clear it out, right? So I think that's something that is known, but the cost is unknown. Sometimes it's more than you expect, sometimes it's a lot less than you expect. It's hard to get a really good number on it. Depends on access, obviously depends on how much they're carrying out of the site. So you have to pay attention to this item as well. Definitely something that could be under budgeted or over budgeted. All right, let's move into our hard costs, because right away we're going to be in more vulnerable territory, which is your footing, foundation, and framing. Everything right here, this is something that is difficult to estimate for everybody. Okay, so maybe this is something that even builders who are experienced, maybe it's just kind of comforting to see that other builders, or at least how I see it, because I know plenty of other builders, this is a place that's pretty difficult. When you talk about footing and foundation, every contractor is kind of estimating it differently. Sometimes they're estimating it by linear foot plus piers. Sometimes they're doing linear footage with the piers counted as a linear footage. Sometimes they're going by square footage. Sometimes they're just going by block and brick. It varies quite a bit, and it's very difficult for not only us to put numbers on it, but for them to put numbers on it. So again, my biggest point of going over everything that you need to focus on where you could be at risk is so you know where to put your contingency costs. There's two places you can put contingency costs. You can put it as its own line item at the end, 10%, 15%, whatever. Or you can put it within each line item, and I recommend doing both. Now, with new construction, you shouldn't really have a huge contingency cost as its own line item, because that should be for things that you completely miss. And that should not be something that you miss very often in new construction, because you need everything new, right? It's not like rehabbing where you didn't know you needed footing and foundation work, and now you have to eat into that contingency. But in new construction, your contingency is going to be within each line item a lot more often. So you have to make sure your footing and foundation gets a pretty good cushion there to make sure that, you can cover everything, because again, it's hard to estimate. So if this is something that just comforts you to know that it's hard for everybody to estimate this line item, maybe that's value in itself. Okay, framing. I will say, I just said that it's a vulnerable spot, framing. Yes and no. For the most part, it's actually pretty easy, because all framers are kind of going by a price per square foot for their labor, right? It could be $6, $7, $8, sometimes up to 10, right? And you kind of have to see where you are, what your territory is, what your framers are charging per square foot, what other builders are being charged per square foot, and you can get to the bottom of that pretty easily. If anything, the lumber is hard to estimate, because it depends on what you're doing and how the architect's putting it together. Here's a huge tip in itself. Make sure your architect's not doing something too crazy. I've seen architects go out there and put like crazy roof plans and truss plans, and it just turns into a lot of trusses, a lot of labor, and you can really skyrocket your budget just by how your architect is making your house. So you have to double check all of that and run it by a framing crew. Okay, see what they say about it early on in the process. You should have these contacts early. Even if it's your first time, you should be making contact early with these framers and see what they think about it. See if there's ways that they can suggest making it better or easier without losing too much character, of course. But if anything, the biggest vulnerability here is a footing and foundation. Framing is just a big item. And if you're vulnerable at all in this item, it's in the project management. And I kind of want to mix that into this video as well. But from here, everything gets really easy. That's the biggest thing with new construction. Windows, you just count them up. What's your supplier charging them at? $250, $260. Nowadays, we're kind of more like $240 per window. So that's actually probably a very good cushion that I have here. Decks and porches, exterior doors, you count them up. Roofing is by square. Let me talk to you about where I'm vulnerable. All right. All the MEPs. For some reason, I'm under budgeting these consistently. I don't know what it is. I'm searching inward, I'm searching outward, but I'm under budgeting these consistently. I think a lot of this is through the past 4 or 5 years where the prices have skyrocketed for them, and they kind of have brought up the price on me as well, rightfully so. But I've been under budgeting these quite a bit so far in this project. This is not going to be the case throughout the whole project, so I'm not trying to boast, but I've been really good on this budget so far for this project. And so far, I've gotten pricing all the way up till probably drywall. So I'm really good at where I'm at right now, but still, it's been kind of difficult. Here with HVAC, you'll see I estimated by square footage. I typically estimate by tonnage. So you can go 2 ton, it's 2 ton up, 2 ton down. So two 2 ton systems. If you say, let's say $4,000 per ton, then you can see it should be around $16,000. So it's very similar to what I'm estimating by square footage. As a matter of fact, I did a custom value with this. So I'm probably even confusing you there. But just remember, that's how you do it. Plumbing is vulnerable just because every plumber does estimate differently for the most part. And let's just say for the most part, okay? They estimate by plumbing points. Some of them don't. Some of them do it a little differently. Most of them will estimate by plumbing points, and that's a whole other conversation, maybe for another video. But plumbing points are fixtures. There's half points in there for things like spigots. I always think 1 point is a supply line and a drain line. So that's all your toilets, vanity faucets, sink faucet or kitchen sink faucets, shower faucets, etc. And then all your simple supply lines. So your refrigerator, your spigots, pot fillers, those would all be like half a point. And then they add up all the points and they charge you a price per point. And these prices per point are also wildly different. You go to a big plumbing company, it could be like $1,000, $1,200 per point. You go to other guys, it could be like $600, $700 per point. You have to have these conversations with them and just be honest. Like, look, I want to estimate more accurately so that by the time you give me a bid, I know exactly, we're in the right range. So I don't have to turn you around and start looking for other people. I want to know this early. So ask your plumbers how they estimate or how they give prices so you can estimate costs better as well. Everything else gets really simple. Installation is typically a good way by square footage. I know I don't have square footage in here, but sometimes I start with square footage and then I dial it back to a custom value. Drywall, this is very interesting. A lot of drywall supplier or installers are going to charge per board. As a matter of fact, I think they basically all do. But I like to estimate this by square footage too. Again, I dialed this back to a lump sum, just custom value, one at 12,000. That is a huge number. I think I'm going to be very underneath that. That's something I've not got a bid on yet. But just know drywall is estimated or priced by board. But I always tell people, don't go in there and start counting boards by yourself when you're estimating costs and think that you're going to be accurate. You're not going to be. I'm sorry. These guys are really, really good at what they do. And even they will estimate the amount of boards that they need for every project. It happens all the time. And what's going to happen is you're going to go in there, you're going to think you know exactly how many boards it is. You're going to count up 150 boards, whatever it is, and it's actually 170 or 120. You're going to end up in a bad place. But if you do it by square footage, you're going to get pretty close, and you're not going to beat yourself up with having to go through the house and try to estimate all the boards just to be wrong anyway. So hopefully that makes sense. That's a huge tip. And I think this video is turning into a lot of estimating mindset and strategy as well. A lot of easy stuff here. Tiles by square footage, hardwood by square footage, shower doors. So this is where it gets really easy. You're just counting. You're either getting measurements or you're counting. So doors, you're getting by door, shower doors by door, cabinets. Now, I just kind of use a lump sum for cabinets because I'm typically in a range of like $5,000 to $6,500, depending on the size of the kitchen for the most part, or what kind of cabinets I put in there. I know a lot of people who put really extra stuff in their cabinets, and this might be more of like a $7,000, $7,500 number, but I know my costs for the most part, so I use a lump sum for my cabinet estimates. Vanities, you're counting. Countertops, I use a lump sum. I know people who try to do linear footage. I don't care to do that either. When it comes to estimating strategy and mindset, again, that might be part of this video now, but for you to kind of get in there and do a measurement of linear footage for countertops, I think it's overkill. I think you can kind of find a good range that you tend to be in. Big kitchens tend to be $4,000. Small kitchens tend to be $2,000. Where are we in this range? And you'll be okay. If you're going to be within $500, you're going to be okay. And there's no point of you doing a linear footage calculation. If you want to, fine, but that's not how I do it. And I've never been burned by it. I know where I get burned, and that's where I really focus on. And it's not on things like cabinets and countertops. And I just use a range and I go from there. Remember, again, strategy with estimating. Your job is to make sure you have everything listed. And what's going to happen is some items you're going to be under budget by 500, some items you're going to be over budget by 500, but the idea is by the end of the budget, by the end of the project, it all comes out in the wash and you end up where you're supposed to be. So don't beat yourself up if you are $500 over budget. Just know that you shouldn't be under budgeting everything, obviously. You should always be honest with yourself, and it should always be coming out in the wash, or else you're kind of lying to yourself, which is a big problem when it comes to making budgets. Plumbing fixtures is by point. Electrical fixtures is by point or by fixture, right? Appliance packages. I think a lot of us know how much those cost. This might even be a big number I have here. So I should be well under budget. For the most part, that hood might cost a little bit, but I think nowadays that number is a lot lower. We have small things here. This is a good tip. Make sure you're listing all the small stuff. I see people not listing mirrors, hardware, exterior hardware, and that adds up over time, right? It's going to add up to a few $100. That's how you can hurt your budget a little bit as well. And that's how things don't come out in the wash. Now, if I was going to say one other vulnerable spot, and it's kind of your exterior stuff. This might be personal, and maybe you're just kind of getting insight into what I do in my business. But when I think of so much stuff within the house, because it's new construction, I tend to kind of forget of stuff outside of the house. So typically you're going to have to pour a walkway somewhere. And a lot of times I can almost forget that. I didn't here, but a lot of times I can forget that. I also want to make sure I'm giving these homeowners a great outdoor space for entertaining. It's definitely great appeal when you're trying to put it on the market for sale. So I'm trying my best to make sure that they have a good space outside. So patios, decks, all that good stuff. I want to make sure this is all included in the budget, and it can be easily overlooked. You can just say, oh, they'll be fine with a deck, but maybe adding a patio would be good, or maybe making that walkway in the front of the house a stamped walkway is going to really increase your value and set you apart from the competition. So it's just a small note, not a big thing, but you got to pay attention to it. So this includes patios, poured walks, fencing, landscaping. Okay. And then you'll see at the bottom, I even have a contingency number of $10,000. So I actually think this is an incredibly conservative budget. I really think I'm going to be more like 280,000 on this build. So talking mindset again, I'm always trying to overestimate. I'm always trying to be conservative. So if you see any of these numbers that seem high, that's really going to be the reason why. There might even be some numbers in here that look a little bit low, but for the most part, this is a really good budget. And again, what I'm going to do is I'm going to get you guys this exact download. We're going to put it in the video description. You can get this for yourself so you can use it if you ever want to build a house for yourself, or if you just want to learn how I estimate and how I detail everything. All right, hopefully that helped. If you guys want to join the Rehabbers Playbook, got to do my plug. Okay, we'll also put a link below to book a call with me. We would love for you to join us. If you're really interested in new construction, you have to join the Rehabbers Playbook. It's not just me building in here. It's a lot of people, like I mentioned in the beginning, and many people in this group are taking on their first build as I'm making this video. We just helped one of our TRP captains with her first new build. We have somebody else doing theirs in a neighborhood down the street. We have somebody else doing theirs in Chesterfield. I'm trying not to give away names, put people on blast, but we have a lot of people doing their first new build. Somebody else in Ohio, somebody else in Georgia. And it's a lot of fun watching people do their first new build. And what happens is they all say the same thing. Once you go into new builds, you never want to go back to rehabs. Okay, so if you're interested, come join the Rehabbers Playbook. We talk about this all the time. We'll have a link in the description. And until the next video, keep building. See you next time.